Hello, everyone. My name is Ivana Premazzi. I'm the founder of Global Mindset Development and the project manager of Project Orrajt Migrator Malta. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the housing issue or the housing crisis in Malta. Why we have what is called an housing crisis or housing issue in Malta. Let's start to say that Malta recently actually liberalized the rents. And after that, there was also, now Malta is also facing new social trends, like more divorces, more separations, more people that decide to live by themselves, so as single, more nuclear families compared to before, as well as an increase in economic immigrations from European and non-European countries. At the same time, Malta also being a touristic destination, there are also areas of the countries and of specific cities where the idea is try also to organize housing, apartments and building in a way that are more for short-term rental in touristic areas. This together also with some like speculations in the property market and in the construction sector. So being this kind of the picture of the situation in Malta, what happened in the last few years was that there is an increase in the demands for the reason that I just explained. And so this was reflected in an increase of prices for rents and for property, for buying properties. But at the same time, the wages and the salaries didn't increase at the same level. Also, considering specifically migration, we need to divide and consider different groups of migrants coming to Malta. The first group being people like foreigners that work in high-earning jobs. And of course, for them, it's also not an issue. Sometimes the high rent prices or the high prices for buying properties. But then, actually, most of the migrants coming to Malta ended up in lower paying jobs. And this is especially true for what are called third country nationals, so non-Europeans, like food courier, people working in the care sector, that really sometimes they have or they even don't have a minimum wage. But especially, as also was recently said, by local expert working on the housing crisis and with homeless people, sometimes actually what is needed is not really a minimum wage, but a livable wage. So what's a wage that can help the people to have a life that they can live with dignity and an accommodation that they can pay and live with dignity. So considering especially people not earning a lot in Malta and coming from other countries, non-EU and EU, what also we can see is that they think of Malta not as with a long-term plan, also because of the difficulties that they face with job opportunities or especially, let me say, labor conditions and housing conditions. So they consider Malta temporary. And so this is also why in the housing and accommodation, they sometimes accept situations that are not really, they're really close to exploitation and abuse, as well as what we can see from like the foreigners living in Malta, they change properties frequently, also because, again, the increase in the rent prices and the property prices that's kind of constantly, they happen constantly, and they decided to share with other foreigners or share with other people. But then we also need to consider some additional issues related to specific migrant groups. And this is related to discrimination that still affected mainly some categories of migrants, especially people from India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, as well as Africa, together with Muslim, especially if they are like visible sign of cultural and religious differences. These people are also more easily subject to abuse. This means that, for example, recently in one of the area of the country, one of the city that is also one of the most touristic place of the area, one apartment was actually rented to 40 migrants. Each of them pay 250 euro. And so making kind of the property owner like was making a lot of money, but then they were living in terrible living conditions with issues related to also like the health and sanitation of the place, and with many also complaints from the neighborhoods and the neighbors that actually thought they were the migrants themselves wanting this situation. So this is kind of the paradox, and it's something it's very important for us to understand about the housing issue in Malta, but not only. The point is that migrants are a vulnerable category. So they found themselves that they have to accept some situations because they cannot change and because of the power dynamics involved. Sometimes they don't have the language skills to understand that they're actually victim of an abuse, exploitation, and fraud. Also, they don't know their rights, or sometimes they know that they do not have rights because they just move, because there's someone else, like an agency or someone else taking care of their like employment rights and housing rights. So they're in a very vulnerable position. So as a locals, it's very important that if we are the locals, we consider and we try to ask ourselves what's going on in this place and why there are so many people living together, because it can be that this is actually not their decision and is not especially their culture, because sometimes people blame the culture. It's like they live together because of their culture, but actually they're living together not with dignity, with terrible human and health conditions because they're victim of an exploitation. So this is very important, together with also the impunity that sometimes, again, is what's happening to the locals and not to the foreigners. The foreigners are blamed for something that actually they are the victims of. What's also very important to mention, who are the people involved in this housing crisis and exploitation of migrants and foreigners related to housing? Of course, or maybe surprisingly, even the estate agents. Sometimes they are actually the gatekeepers. They are the one who start the first discrimination, or on the other side, who start the exploitation of the migrants. And this is also why there are areas of cities and of the country where actually there are only some categories of migrants, only some nationalities, only some people coming from a specific region of the world or a specific country, as well as in other areas is more multicultural. And then also property owners. So they're also, of course, the one that sometimes charge and like suggest the estate agents to again put this limitation and discrimination. Sometimes they are the one acting this discrimination. And then, of course, people living in the neighborhood also, that, again, as I said before, sometimes they don't understand who are the actual victims and how the issues should be considered and tackled. So what people can do, and what also in Malta organization and association are trying to promote, it's for sure awareness of the rights of the migrants related to housing, awareness of when a discrimination is happening, when abuse is happening, when some conditions are actually not tolerable, and so there is a need to report them. Also more effective way to report, and also to abide by the law, and also by the different strategies related, for example, to like anti-racism, anti-discrimination, inclusion, and so on. That, of course, the housing and the accommodation is kind of the first step. So if you're living with dignity, then you're also able to like thrive in the place, and you want to stay and you want to contribute. But of course, if where you live is and you're living in terrible living conditions, this will make it everything more difficult, and it will make it you more at risk of exploitation and also of discrimination. one last aspect to mention, of course, as I said before, it's not cultural, the fact that foreigners decided to live together. But if we consider the Maltese society, is also true that, for example, homeless is not so visible for different reasons. One, be Malta still be a needs society. So people still try to support each other. And so there's not homeless in the sense of really seeing people on the street. But again, there can be living conditions that are quite close to, or sometimes even worse than being homeless. And this is very important because this can affect the locals and the migrants. Also, the migrants being more from collectivistic societies like Africa or Asia, it can also be that they decided to stay together and support each other, as well as they have economic obligation of sending money back home. So this is why they accept to share a place. But again, it's very important not to forget the responsibilities of the local population. In this case, estate agents, property owners, and everyone that's involved in the exploitation. And again, be very aware of what's going on before blaming one category or another, some people or others, and also try to understand and doing an awareness work of try to help people to develop like skills to understand their rights, and so be really able to fight for their rights and accept and get living with dignity. And one last point is also to promote more like social housing. That's something happening in Malta, but still it can be improved, and how it can be the access of social housing also for like refugees, asylum seekers, as well as economic migrants, then maybe need this kind of support and solutions. Thank you for watching.